if they can't come to their own consciousness and understanding and believing that what that they have done was inadequate and wrong towards dereliction of duty, not just here in Tennessee, but also up in Kentucky and also out in Oklahoma, then I'll be damned hell or high water before I try to force them in admitting that they was wrong and doing the right thing. In other words, if it's going to take me hiring a Johnny Cochran just to be able to force them in doing something that they're not willing to do voluntarily, I don't want it and don't need it anyway. I'll do just exactly how Noah done his procedure towards once he realized that he was talking to a bunch of insanity people that wasn't going to pay any attention to what he had to say. He basically throwed up his hands and said, God, there's nothing more that I can do other than continue to beat and bang on this boat until I finally finish it and gather up all the animals and the rest of my family. And instead of me being concerned towards trying to save society, be more concerned about trying to save my family and myself. Because there does come a time whenever God the Father will give people up to a reprobate mind and allow for them to believe a lie and to become damned. And I believe that that's where we are right now with a society that won't listen. They won't listen to the scientists. They won't listen to the environmentalists. They won't listen to the doctors pertaining to the coronavirus. They won't listen to the people pertaining to what they're being subject to towards homelessness, all these drugs, all this pornography, all this nudity, killing all these children, being trillions of dollars in debt. I really and truly believe that we are at our Achilles heel in the year 2020. So as you listen to this message, keep that in mind, that yeah, I could bring lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit pertaining to the people up here in Dresden, Tennessee, pertaining to Tommy Thomas and Tommy Moore and the public prosecutor, and I could go after the police force in Martin, Tennessee, pertaining to the mayor, Randy Brundage. I could go after various authority figures over in Kenton, Tennessee. I could go after various authority figures up in Kentucky. I could go after various authority figures over in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And to some extent, I could probably even go after some pertaining to the GBI over in Atlanta, Georgia. But once more, that's not my thing. That's not who I am. If I have to force somebody in liberating the problem, then obviously we got a bigger problem than liberating coming from that particular group of people. And I truly believe that is exactly what Noah was looking at during the time that he was looking at it, because there come a time to where he basically realized that he was beating on a dead horse towards trying to arise society in understanding that God had, yes, tangibly, physically spoken to Noah and told Noah that he was going to destroy that society of people because of the wickedness that they was committing upon each other, and because of that in which what they was doing to God. So as you listen to this particular broadcast pertaining to the police force of good cop, bad cop, understand that there's more ways that God can get his message across to a society other than each other taking retribution out on and up onto each other. And if they're not wise enough to identify this and to understand this, odds are they probably need to be eradicated from the planet Earth anyways, regardless whether it come in the form of old age, sickness, a pandemic, a hurricane, a flood, a fire, a disease, or whatever. So as you listen to this broadcast pertaining to the good cop, bad cop, understand that the police force pertaining to the public defenders that are supposed to be just as equal towards fairness with the poor society as they are the rich society are not. Because they all stand in the same corner, they all sleep in the same beds, they all rub shoulders with each other at the end of the day. And because they have to look at each other and face each other, they're more prone, just as the old saying goes, that birds of a feather flock together. So as you listen to this particular program, understand that there is thousands, if not millions of people just like me that has been violated by the system. But because they know what they're up against, rather than try to do anything any different, other than basically what I'm doing, which is telling my story on social media, they have made a choice to basically sit back and let Mother Nature take care and run its course. It's the nature of the beast. What is to be will be, and if it wasn't meant to be, it won't be. As you listen to this program, understand that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, such as myself, that has been beat up on, violated, demonized, dehumanized, similar towards the prophets of God that have stood up with a message. And the people at that time, the culture, the generation, didn't want to pay any attention to what that they was having to say. Didn't want to hear them. Didn't want to understand them. Didn't want to have any empathy or sympathy for them. They just excluded them from their lifestyles and then went on about their business. Well, whenever enough suffering and enough grief and enough sorrow falls upon to this nation because of what happened in 1980 and 8 pertaining to an actual conspiracy against the church society, against God's holy saints, whenever enough people go through enough suffering, maybe then and then and then only, where there'll be a movement coming from the Windmill Ministries towards declaring the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God. Good luck to all of us as we listen to this broadcast. And like I said, we want you to listen to it with an open mind because of all the suffering and all the pain. And I understand that there's a lot of good cops out there that's on the beat. But there's also a lot of bad ones. And whenever you have bad versus good and good versus bad, that is this predominant out on the streets, you're going to have hell, fire, and brimstone that is going to fall upon that nation, such as we are seeing right now in the good old USA. Please listen.
Jelani Cobb, one of the nation's foremost journalists on race and politics, felt compelled to revisit his 2016 documentary called Policing the Police, which charted Newark, New Jersey's attempt to reform its police force. 4 years later, what has he found? Here's a bit of that documentary.
One thing I noticed right away were the protests. Unlike in other cities, where the police confronted protesters with rubber bullets and tear gas, in Newark, Mayor Baraka was leading the march.
And Jelani Cobb joins me now from New York. Welcome back to the program. This is a very powerful documentary. It's going to air on PBS tomorrow. Tell me a little bit about leadership. We've been talking about leadership, whether it's on climate, whether it's on coronavirus, and of course on racial justice and policing. You really focused and profiled Mayor Baraka of Newark. And he's done something quite new and novel and different from many, many other mayors across the country. Tell us a little bit about that to start with.
Sure. And so I'll say up front that I've known Mayor Baraka since our college days at Howard University. And so I have a kind of background to him, and his family has long history in Newark. He's the son of the poets Amiri and Amina Baraka, and activists and people who have been kind of significant contributors to the city's life there. And so when he came in to office in 2014, he was fairly well known in the city. But also, he came in at a moment of crisis. The Department of Justice had said that there was a pattern and practice of the violation of people's constitutional rights by the police department there. As the kind of political saying is, you don't let a crisis go to waste. What they have done is really use that as a springboard to try innovative and different approaches to policing, to try to see what policing can be like in the city.
I want to get more into that, but first I want to ask you to explain part of that by what you've said at the start of the documentary. You say, in this country, race is a shorthand for a set of life probabilities. How does that relate to policing? What do you mean by it specifically as it relates to policing?
Sure. Well, we know that race is a non-existent biological category, but socially it carries a great deal of weight. We can look at someone's race and have some idea of the probabilities of their likelihood of infant mortality, of their life expectancy, of the disparity between their projected life earnings and the life earnings of someone who racially is categorized as white, and a whole array of different really life outcome dynamics that correlate to what someone's skin looks like. Policing is one of those institutions where we see disparities in the use of force, we see disparities in sentencing for the same sorts of offenses. We see the criminal justice system being reflective of the same sorts of inequities that we see in housing, in employment, in education, and so on. There's a line that Mayor Baraka has in there where he said that the police are, as an institution, no different than any other American institution in terms of they have the same attitudes. The difference is that the police just have guns. And so it makes those attitudes, the acting upon those attitudes have potentially lethal outcomes.
So I want to ask you what you've learned and what's changed or not from when you first started this back in 2016 to the update that you're doing right now. So this documentary shows your night out as you follow I think it's the Newark gang unit, the police gang unit. And you follow them and you see some, pretty difficult things. Tell me what you saw and what's happened to that gang unit.
Yeah, well, and when we first went there in 2015, it was kind of like the Wild West. The police would conduct what is euphemistically referred to as stop and frisk, but they were doing things that were far more invasive. They would stop people on the street and grab them and pull the waistband of their underwear away from their body and look down into their private parts to see if the person had a weapon or a drug stashed. And this would happen in public on the street in a kind of way that would not be countenanced by any other kind of community, certainly not a suburban white community. We saw the police tackling people, kind of jumping out of the car and in groups and tackling people on the street and then searching them and finding no drugs and sending them on their way. And obviously this has great constitutional implications for the kind of policing we were seeing there when we first got there in 2015.
I mean, it's been disbanded now, right? Presumably because of the problems with the unit.
Yeah, the gang unit was disbanded shortly after the film aired. And it really was, we never intended to do two films, but, circumstances kind of lent itself to that, especially in looking at how the world really was responding to the George Floyd moment that, started in May of this year. What we saw was that, the department, still has its problems, but it's certainly a better department than it was when we first went there, by the indications of many of the people we talked to.
Yeah, and that's what I'm really interested to get at. Let's just go back, though, because one of the things that was implemented in New Jersey, in Newark, was this thing called a consent decree. Can you explain what that is and how that improved the situation in Newark?
Sure. So a consent decree is basically a agreement between the federal government, specifically the Department of Justice, and a local police department. And the agreement stipulates that they will implement specific reforms in order to create a better and more functional police department. The mechanism for the DOJ doing that comes out of the 1994 crime bill. And so in the case of Newark, they stepped in and they have a list of things they want to see improved, and they appoint a federal monitor who is charged with overseeing the implementation of those reforms. One of the things that we heard, which seems kind of shocking, but the federal monitor there is a man by the name of Peter Harvey, who's a former Attorney General of New Jersey. And he said one of the things that we needed to do was make sure that law enforcement officers actually understood the law. There were lots of things that police thought they could do legally that actually are not legal. And that has been the kind of basic fundamental introduction to the constitutionality of particular parts of policing
And I can personally vouch for that again and again and again towards what that they have done to me without any judgment or without any type of warrant signed by a judge. What they do usually in this county, the sheriff's department or the local PD, whoever that's doing the arresting, will go ahead and move on their own intuition, on their own instinct. And the judge, 99.9% of the time, will back them up and act like that he already signed the affidavit, given the police department permission to actually go and apprehend that person. That's what they do illegitimately here in this area, and I'm sure if they do it here in this area, they probably do it all over America. In other words, somebody can tell a cop something that can be a total lie, and that cop will take it upon that person's testimony that what he or she has said was the gospel, and they'll go ahead and move on it, not knowing that if it is the gospel, and the judge will back up the police officer that made the arrest. And then you got to fight it in court by either hiring your own attorneys or depending upon a lousy public defender that could basically care less pertaining to your personal innocence. Now, they'll tell you that they care about people's innocence. That's the umbrella that they stand under, these public defenders that's being paid by the county and by the state and by the federal government. They'll tell you, oh no, we're strictly all about trying to prove someone's innocence. We don't want to see nobody go to jail or be punished for something that they haven't done. But if there's enough people in that circuit, if there's enough people in that county that's against that person, and it doesn't matter if the charge is accurate or not. If they've gotten tired of dealing with this person and they're deciding that they're all going to come up against this person and put them away and really punish them, that's exactly what happened to me. Exactly what happened to me. Whenever the police officer asked me to step outside, I thought it was a courtesy type deal towards him wanting to talk to me one-on-one. I had no earthly idea that he was going to immediately ask me to turn around, put my hands behind my head, that I was being arrested for stalking because I was concerned about some children across the road. If I would have known what this police officer was up to, do you really think that I would have answered the door under the circumstances of him not having a warrant? Do you really think that I would have been so stupid or foolish to have walked outside if I thought for 1 second that this police officer wasn't entrapping me? Just off of a whore's testimony? A crack whore's testimony? That's exactly what this police officer done. He took a crack whore that had a messed up whore boyfriend. Crack boyfriend on crack crystal meth. And took their testimony over my brothers and I and basically entrapped me to the point of me walking outside, and as soon as I walked outside, then that was open domain. Open domain. Put your hands behind your head. See, at that particular point in time, he actually didn't have to go get a judgment or a warrant, because now he already had me in custody. But I guarantee you, on the way to the courthouse or the jailhouse, the judge already had that cop's back. Oh yeah, I gave him permission. Oh, there's no doubt he had full permission of a warrant towards arresting Mr. Jackson because of the charge that had been brought before the courts. That's how they operate. They're operating illegally. Same way that they done up there in Kentucky. Whenever I made 2 telephone calls that was not against any type of court order, any type of judgment whatsoever, that was non-threatening in an apologetic form, and they put out 2 federal warrants for my arrest for stalking in the first degree, which according to their books, according to their law up in Kentucky, covered the charge of 1 to 5 years for stalking on the telephone. Telephone stalking. And they had convinced me, after me staying up there for 9 months, that I wasn't going to stay up there for 9 months, but I was going to stay up there for 9 years. That they was going to railroad me all the way to the fullest extent of the law. And naturally, whenever you're facing that, somebody like me at the time that didn't have no money, didn't have no pull, I look at the second best option. What's the second best option? Well, Mr. Jackson, if you'll plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge, they won't pursue any further time, and they'll release you on your own recognizances. What dummy wouldn't do that? Admit to a charge that he didn't never have anything to do with to begin with. Kind of like me, after being incarcerated for 37 days and attempting to hang myself in jail right up here in Weakley County because of all the bullshit that was going on in my life. Plus I was grieving over a dead brother that the Ridgeway family and the Sheffield family helped to put him in a grave, an early grave, as well as others around here in this community. At that point in time, death looked predominant to me. Death looked good to me at that time. After being railroaded again and again and again and again and again by either the federal judicial system or the Kentucky judicial system, or yes, now the Tennessee judicial system, in which I'd done already been railroaded before in 1989 over the sword in Madison County. I'd done already been railroaded before over falsifying files in 2005 over the Martin PD. And now I'm being railroaded again over being concerned over 3 little children across the road, of them being exposed to an environment that me and David didn't feel like that they should have been exposed to. May these people die and rot in hell because of what that they have done towards attacking the innocent. And whenever I say the innocent, I'm talking about people such as myself that was trying to do the good Samaritan deed towards taking care of those 3 little children, in which I have no earthly idea where those children are to this day. I was told that the mother is working in Wendy's over in Union City. I would rather choke and be poisoned than to go to Wendy's in Union City right now and eat if I thought for 1 second that she was over there serving food. Because of the abomination that this community tried to perform upon to an innocent soul that had good intentions towards wanting to help them. You don't put up a neighborhood watch sign in your yard if you don't plan on staying within the guidelines of the law. You don't put up a rehabilitation sign and stick it on your building pertaining to recovery if you didn't have good intentions towards wanting to help people. But I have reached the point, like Noah, that you cannot help those that don't want help, and there reaches a time that you no longer throw your pearls out before the swine. And whenever I'm talking about the swine, I'm just not talking about the actual neighborhood that I'm living in right here. I'm talking about the judicial system. I'm talking about Tommy Thomas, Tommy Moore, the prosecuting attorneys. I'm talking about the Martin PD. I'm talking about the people, the judges in all these little old towns, and the cops that don't know the law themselves, that are breaking the law every day. So once you reach this point in your life, you realize, it's not going to do no good to go hire a Johnny Cochran. Because the odds of you actually getting a good attorney that actually preaches what he believes in defending someone's innocence is probably going to be slim to none, because birds of a feather flock together, and it doesn't matter if it's judges, it doesn't matter if it's sheriffs, it doesn't matter if it's deputies, it doesn't matter if it's probation officers, it doesn't matter if it's the public defenders. Birds of a feather flock together. In other words, you put them in a sack, shake them up, drop them out, and they all come out the same. Once I reach that point, the point that where I'm at right now, as far as the point of despair, you say, you know what? It's up to God to straighten this thing out. Because it ain't no Johnny Cochran going to straighten it out. It ain't no Ronald Reagan or old man Senior Bush or young Bush going to straighten this problem out. It ain't the Madison County Police Department going to straighten it out. It ain't the Davidson-Nashville Police Department or the Knoxville Police Department that's going to straighten it out. It ain't the Martin or the Weakley County or the Obion County Police Department or the Kenton Police Department that's going to straighten it out. It ain't the Paducah or the Benton, Kentucky or the Land Between the Lakes or the Grand Rivers community that's going to straighten this out. It's going to take God towards bringing retribution upon these people's lives. And until they're willing to do the right thing, as the old saying goes, for a good person can make a mistake, but it takes a better one to admit it. Until they're willing to admit it, do you think I'm looking for any type of confirmation from these people? The confirmation that I'll get is whenever I hear them screaming and hollering, being in hell on account of all this. Because they have allowed for this grief and misery to fall upon not only the American people's lives, but the whole world. The type of confirmation that I'm looking for, one day, I'll get in the supernatural spiritual world. Because it says very, very clear that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And all these people around here can continue to sit on their hands and act like that they don't know a thing and plead insanity if they want to. But I guarantee you, God Almighty knows the truth about what they know and what that they have been a part of. And this conspiracy didn't just begin in 2014 whenever I decided to move back to Tennessee with my brother and I. But it actually began 30 plus years ago whenever they thought that they was going to hoodwink, bamboozle, deceive, or manipulate God's chosen people. So as I sit back and I watch all this suffering and misery and sorrow be falling upon to society, I know who's at fault. The feet falls upon the fault falls upon the feet of those that could have done something but chose not to. They will be judged towards doing the very opposite of what the Good Samaritan done. The Good Samaritan in the Bible knew that he should have taken an individual, even though he didn't know him, bind up his wounds, take him to an inn, tell the innkeeper to take care of this person, and if I owe you any more money, whenever I come back, let me know and I'll pay you. The Good Samaritan done what he knew to be good, not only morally, but also spiritually. So the Good Samaritan will be rewarded for what he done. On the other hand, if the Good Samaritan did not do what he knew to do, and he still didn't do it, instead of him being rewarded, he'll be punished. It just so happens on this particular experience or analogy, the Good Samaritan in the Bible done the right thing. But has all these other people around in this area done the right thing? Has the people in Kentucky done the right thing? Has the people in Oklahoma done the right thing? Has the people in Atlanta, Georgia, pertaining to the GBI, done the right thing? I can mark out no, no, positively no, positively, triply, absolutely no. None of them has come forth. And if it takes me hiring a Johnny Cochran to get these people to do the right thing, well then obviously I don't need to force them in doing the right thing. Because then it's not going to be coming from the heart. It's not going to be sincere. So as we sit and we watch the torment of people's lives be destroyed again and again and again on every occurrence, and this year it has intensified sevenfold in comparison to what it was the year before in 2019. I'm just wondering if God the Father is going to turn the heat up and raise the bar again in 20 and 21 towards it being 7 times more worse than what it was in the year 2020. And if he does, it won't be God's fault, but it will be people like Tommy Thomas, Tommy Moore, the prosecuting attorneys, all these preachers, all these deacons, all these other people that's associated with either the church community or the law enforcement community. It will be their faults. As I sat back and watched the suffering become untold. As the old saying goes, if they can live with it, I can live without it. In the meantime, the only thing that I can do is do like I'm doing now, is by putting stuff on my social media platforms and telling my story again and again and again, beginning with my own people, in my own family, in my own home city, that retaliated against me, that called me a bare-faced liar after me telling them that God had spared my life for a reason. More than once, that was obvious not only to the atheist, but obvious even to anybody else. So this movement that the West Tennessee has been a part of, that is now trickled all the way up to Nashville, to the seat of the governor's seat, I promise you, will be recorded and implemented upon, if not in this lifetime, in the lifetime to come. Let's listen to the rest of this, and I appreciate y'all's time.
They started with, and then kind of gone on from there with scenarios and moved through various other kinds of trainings that were supposed to produce a different mindset and different actions on the part of police in the city.
I actually found that fascinating what Peter Harvey said to you, that he actually thought rather than defunding the police in that terminology that suddenly gained currency, he thinks there should be more investment precisely along the lines that you say, to beef up their knowledge and their experience and their training and the rest. What do you say to that? Because obviously a lot of people in the community are talking defund the police. So tell me where that stands, because it also scares the bejesus out of a whole nother load of another side of the community.
Yeah, it does, but I'm not sure that it should. And the reason I say that is, Peter Harvey does make the point. He says that if you're thinking about defunding the police, fixing the police departments actually costs money too. So you don't want to have a problem and then deny yourself the revenue that you need in order to fix the problem. The other part of it, though, is that I have heard, the first time I heard anyone say the ideas that have generally become associated with defund the police, which is that you should...
My opinion about fixing the police, whenever you have the commissioners and the mayor and everybody else that's on the committee, regardless whether it's the city board committee or the county board committee, whenever you have everybody that's working that's corrupt, that's working in the same type environment, it's kind of like trying to vote somebody off the island. What good is it going to do to vote somebody off the island if the person you're trying to get off the island owns part of the island or actually owns the island? Whenever you're dealing with this, with the masses, with this many people that is corrupt, with this many people that is brainwashed, this many people that thinks that they're above the law and they can trick and bamboozle the citizens the way that they have, and I'm just speaking from personal experience, I'm pretty sure there's hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands more testimonies out there that are similar to mine. Whenever you have this much corruption going on, you can't repair or fix the police department, because it goes beyond the police department. It goes all the way to the core of who's in charge of the police department, which is the politicians, the preachers, the people that go to church every Sunday, that rub shoulders, that drive brand new Fords and Silverados and live in nice homes and wear nice clothes, that has big fat bank accounts. This thing goes deep, and it goes all the way back to the Reagan administration 30 plus years ago. And until the people are willing to wise up to it, towards understanding not just part of the picture, but the whole picture, kind of like, do you swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, the whole truth, so help you God? If you don't want to hear the whole truth towards looking at all of the corruption, then leave it alone. Let it fester. And let God cull the herd and count them out. Either by disease or whatever. Because they have brought this upon the lives of the innocent. Why, good people, professional people, expert people, tried to warn them ahead of time what was going to happen, what was going to occur. And this hippie Woodstock bunch didn't want to listen. They didn't want to believe the messenger. Just like they didn't want to believe Noah. Just like they didn't want to believe other prophets of God that has come forth with a divine message. They wanted to stomp, romp, and tromp them out too as well. So let whatever befallens upon to society falls upon the society, because the fault falls upon those of the pillars of the communities that could have done something 30 plus years ago but chose not to. 20 plus years ago, chose not to. 10 plus years ago, chose not to. 2020 is many messages that I put out on my YouTube channel. You would think by now somebody would have done already come and knocked on my door and said, Juby, we're with you, man. What do you want us to do? We support you in your message pertaining to the Antichrist, the two witnesses, the opening of the seals, and the Lord Jesus Christ. Have I seen? Have I heard? Nope. So let the judgment fall upon the ones that need to be judged. Let God cull them out and let them fall where they fall. Just like the Bible says that in the last days, Christ will come back and he will sever the wicked from among the just. You don't think that these hurricanes and tornadoes and floods and fires and all this other bad stuff pertaining to the pandemic, you don't think that this is the hand of God working towards severing the wicked from among the just? And then there's another perspective you got to look at, that there's some of them out here that actually death is too good for. Death is too good for them. God's preserving them people, wanting their children or their children's children to go ahead and take that mark. Go ahead and take that mark. Because there'll come a day when they'll beg and want to die. They'll beg for the rocks to fall upon them according to the scriptures. And the rocks will fall not. Then is whenever the true righteous judgment falls upon the society. And then is whenever the people that deserve the type of punishment will in fact get that punishment. That's the part that I stand true towards. That's the part that redeems any type of vindication coming from the Windmill Ministries. Because I know that I stand on the consciousness of God. And I know that vengeance is His. And even though I don't have to raise a finger, those that has been a part of this, they will stand at the throne room of God. And the only thing that they'll be able to say is guilty. Guilty. Well, you had an opportunity that you could have went down there to Mr. Jackson's property. And you could have set things right with him. How come you didn't? Guilty. You had an opportunity that you could have went and apologized to the boy. And you could have marked those records off of his record. But you chose not to. Why? Guilty. The mayor of Martin, guilty. These other mayors around in this area, guilty.
Should be funding alternate social
Guilty.
service organizations that can handle things that police are ill-equipped to respond to, like, for instance, mental health crises, and a slate of other things that police do that doesn't fall directly in the purview of law enforcement. The first time I ever heard that was from a police.
The last time that I was in jail, I want to back
officer.
this up a little bit. The last time I was in jail, which was in 2017, right up here in Weakley County, I stayed up there for 37 days and attempted to kill myself because of the environment that I was in. A bunch of drug dealers, a bunch of deadheads, a bunch of people that had done already burnt their minds completely, totally up. To the point that not only did you not know what they was going to say, but you didn't know what they was going to do. But the last time I was subject to being in jail, either here in Weakley County or in Christian County up in Kentucky, I promise you, it was worse than any mental institution that I've ever been evaluated in, regardless whether it was in LaGrange, Kentucky, MCC in downtown Chicago, Butner, North Carolina, in their mental health facility, or in downtown Bolivar, or in Clarksville, Tennessee. Out of all the mental institutions that I've ever been associated with towards going in and being evaluated, including the one in downtown Nashville for 48 hours, after Homeland Security put me in there simply because of me saying a bloody road ahead, after Katrina had hit, I had never been seduced to so much craziness and wickedness as I have towards going either in the Weakley County Jail in 2017 towards a bunch of people that needed to be mentally institutionalized and put somewhere or put on heavy medication, or in the one up in Christian County. It was that bad. In other words, I would favor towards going to any mental institution before I would a jailhouse. A matter of fact, I just got through talking to an individual, I think it was yesterday, last night, over in Dyersburg at Walmart, had tattoos up and down both arms, up and down his neck. I could tell by looking at him whenever I first spotted him. Yep, you've been in jail. Stop and talk to him. Man, where'd you get all your tattoos? In jail? Yep, got them all in jail. Where was you? Oh, I was down in so-and-so prison down there in Louisiana. Oh my God. One of the worst prison systems in the country. That boy sat there in 2 minutes time and told me about incident after incident after incident of things that he had either been exposed to, seen, heard, or actual happened. And I know within 2 minutes of everything that he was telling me was the truth. And I'm thinking to myself, yep, you were down there in a crazy house. That's what the jails has turned into. You see, Ronald Reagan is to blame for this because Ronald Reagan defunded the mental institutions back in the 80s and took all those people that was supposedly not harmful to anybody and put them out on the streets. Well, whenever he done that, it closed a lot of these psychiatric wards down. And a lot of these doctors, they thinned out to where you don't have your psychologist and your psychiatrist out there anymore that's actually attending to these type of needs. So whenever you hear what you're hearing coming out of this guy's mouth right here, you're actually hearing the truth. Let's listen to it one more time.
Things that police are ill-equipped to respond to, like, for instance, mental health crises, and,
don't have a clue about people's mental health. You know why? Because they themselves come off the streets more than likely that they was doing some sort of drugs, or their father and their mother was on some sort of drugs. The blind leading the blind.
Of other things that police do that doesn't fall directly in the purview of law enforcement. The first time I ever heard that was from a police officer. And probably the second, third, and fourth times I ever heard that was from cops. They said they have us doing things that we really shouldn't do. We should be focusing on the things that we actually are trained to do. And so I think in some ways the rhetoric is probably more radical than the practicality of the approach to it.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I wonder if that's a message that should go out more wider in terms of trying to get more of the police and certainly the union leaders on board, because you also had a really interesting conversation with one of the
and then they want to falsely accuse me, like David Mayo over in Milan, Tennessee, that I was a neighbor with for almost 5 years. Well, Dennis, maybe they thought your message was too radical. Well, guess what? It wasn't my message. All I was doing was transliterating the message that had already been put on paper. It wasn't my message. So it wasn't that Dennis Jackson was a radical, but Dennis Jackson got punished just as if Dennis Jackson was a radical. And now, 30 plus years ago, 30 years has passed to where now all this drug inducement has invaded the land. And we got all these factories that is shut down that looks like tombstones spread all over America because of it. But yet now, won't nobody in this area admit that they was wrong. Somebody was wrong. Somebody led us down the wrong path. Somebody misfunded the funds. Somebody done something wrong for the countryside to have been turned upside down the way that it has. Now, where is the people that should be held accountable? You know, in all these other countries, they hold their leaders accountable. We don't do that in this country. We try to vote them out. And basically what we do is kick the can down the road. And we basically still have the same group of people that was, regardless whether they was working for the Republicans or the Democrats, well, we'll change our name tag on our platel. Instead of us working for Senator so-and-so, now we're working for Senator so-and-so. Instead of us working for Congressman so-and-so, now we're working for this Congressman so-and-so. It's the same group of people. Don't you get it? They're embedded. They got a stronghold. Some of these people have been in charge now for 30 years in the same positions. The sheriff in this county has been elected 9 different times, 20-something years, almost 25, 27 years. Career politicians that don't even know how to operate their phone, much less the fundamentals of it. They haven't been up to the task. They haven't been up to the task for the past 10 or 15 years when we started seeing all these shootings and killings across the land. And now we're going to vote them back in? We're going to put them back in power? Well, then you're going to put the same problem right back in problem again. You're going to kick the can right down the road again. God's going to put an end to it. Some way, one way, another. God will put an end to it, even if he has to bring desecration upon to the whole flock. I hate to say it, but that's the way God works. And the thought won't fall upon the God. It will fall upon to the feet of those that could have done the right thing, but chose not to.
Police union chiefs there in New Jersey, and you had shown him some of the, again, I mean, just shocking videos of people just going about their business and suddenly being jumped on and tackled to the ground for things that ended up not being anything. Let's just play this little bit of sound of your conversation.
I think that's what people would say is the problem, that if you have an interaction with police, a system is set up that will generally exonerate the police officer irrespective of what happens.
You know,
I think that's the criticism people make.
I'm glad you mentioned it, but the investigation...
He's right. The way the system is set up, right or wrong, it don't matter if they lure you out to your front porch or not without a warrant. The way the system is set up, it will exonerate the police officers 99.9% of the time. Now, there's no doubt the individual that done what they done 2 days ago out in Southern California towards walking up to a police car and waylaying into two police officers, I guess shot them in the head, shot them in the face, I don't know, shot them somewhere. Maybe shot them in the shoulders, I don't know, shot them in the neck. There's no doubt stuff like that is wrong. It is wrong. But at the same time, you got to be willing to look at both sides of it towards, you know, those two police officers may have done something to that individual that caused that individual to do that. I'm not saying that what that individual done is right, because it's wrong. But at the same time, the way that the system is set up, it's set up to exonerate the police officers every time, even though we see it on TV of a police officer putting 7 bullets into a man's back, even though there was no obvious threat of any kind. As far as I know, those police officers still have not been arrested. So the way the system is set up, it is set up to exonerate and to protect those who break the law. And we're talking about the law enforcement agencies that's supposed to be protecting all of us from the law, with the law. You're not supposed to take the law and be a vigilante like that cop was that put 7 bullets into that guy. Just like you're not supposed to be like that boy down there in Southern California that waylaid into those police officers and put a bunch of caps in them. So you got both sides that are working against the middle. And until we're willing to sit down and talk this out and straighten this out, I guarantee you the wrath of God, the judgment of God is upon this nation. And I'm going to end it right there because I got things to do. Good luck to all of us is all I can say, and shalom.
Reveals what the officer's allowed to do, right? Mm-hmm. You know, that's the beauty and the curse of social media. You see a video, everyone loses their mind. He can't do that, he can't do this. Well, maybe he actually can. You know, maybe the law, maybe why so many cops are not convicted, which is, you know, part of the uproar, is because they actually acted within their rights and within the law based on what occurred at that time.
So, Jelani, I was really fascinated because you said to him, there's a difference between what might be...
Maybe so, but maybe not. Maybe it grows on chickens' rear ends. You can put maybes in one hand and crap in the other and see which one fills up the quickest.
Legal and what is right.
Maybe.
And it was the first time I saw a flicker in his eyes. I wonder if...
Maybes. Kind of like rabies. Mites. Mites grows on chickens' asses. Maybes. Rabies! Rabies! Mites! Mites!
If that sort of struck you, because he suddenly sort of, thought, well, yeah, maybe if we looked at these videos a little bit more, maybe we could go over them, do an after-action report, and perhaps do something different. That's what I took away from it. Am I being overly optimistic?
Possibly. The reason I say that is that I've talked with...
I'm sorry for having to break in. I really am. I'm sorry for having to break in. But I guarantee you, if we was at a Kentucky Derby and there was any doubt that one horse violated another horse's space, they would review every angle of that race until the judges knew without a shout that they knew of the decision that they was making was in fact the right decision. We'll spend all kinds of money on a Kentucky Derby race to make sure we're following it right down to the letterhead. But whenever it comes to a human being's life, of what a cop either can or can't do, or what a citizen can or can't do, we kind of just leave that shuffling in the wind, don't we? That tells you where our priorities are. That tells you exactly where our priorities are. All these elderly people that has been left behind, all these military soldiers pertaining to our veterans have been left behind. This has got to be one of the sorriest societies that America has ever raised up, is the society that has come against this message coming from one of the messengers of the founder of the Windmill Ministries. This has to be one of the sorriest societies that America has ever inbreeded. And that's saying a lot, because the society that went up against the Native American red man back years ago that was killing the Indians, that was a pretty damn sorry society back then in the 15, 16, early 1700s. That was a pretty damn sorry society then. But the society that's growing now is worse. Is worse. And I'm going to tell you why they're worse. Drugs. They have been given over to a reprobate mind to believe a lie and to be damned. They're reprobates. They're heathens. And they're causing so much pain upon to the innocent lives of the innocent. And you wonder how come we're seeing fires. You wonder how come we're seeing hurricane after hurricane. You're wondering how come we're seeing a pandemic in 2020. You're wondering how come we're seeing all these problems.
He saw
wonder no more.
What the police officer did as
quit wondering
in the confines of the law. And I was raising a broader, I think, ethical question of saying, but any community or any community member who witnesses that is not going to walk away with a favorable view of the police. And if you're attempting to have a police department that has a functional relationship with the community that is charged with serving, you can't simply say this is legal. And quite frankly, part of what is what is legal and not, the barometer for that has been the effectiveness of the police union itself in lobbying the legislature and the governor to pass laws that give them this kind of broad leeway. And so you can't simply look at it legalistically if you're talking about the holistic relationship of police to their communities. And I think that was what I was trying to get at in that discussion with him.
Yeah. So News is also using community interventions. There's a very interesting group of people. Some of them are former gang members. Some have come from California to help. The mayor has diverted some 5%, I think, of the public safety budget to this street team to try to diffuse some of the potential problems. Let's just put a little bit of this part of the program, and then we'll talk.
Talk to me a little bit about what's happening here and why the street team is walking down Brookdale Street.
Yeah, so July 4th weekend, we had a double homicide on this block.
Wow.
You know, we talked directly to the family members who've been impacted. And if there is plan for retaliation, that we convince them not to retaliate. We always say that we cannot stop the first bullet, but we sure can stop the second, the third, and the fourth one.
Really, really interesting part of the documentary. What was their relationship of the street team with the actual police? Was it tense? Did they work together? How did it work out?
According to all parties, it started out kind of tense. The police were like, who are these people? What are they doing? And certainly because the Newark Community Street Team is made up of people, some of whom are former gang members, some of whom were people who were doing things that had a detrimental impact on their communities, there wasn't a lot of love lost between the two. But what seems to have developed is a functional working relationship. And what the street team is involved in is essentially diplomacy, the diplomatic work of de-escalating conflict in communities, things that police are probably not credible enough to do. But these are people who are respected in their neighborhoods, people who grew up in the neighborhoods.
Not only are the police not qualified to do it, but a lot of their sergeants and their people above them, going all the way to your
credibility and their knowledge.
The politics of it are not qualified. They don't have a clue. It's the blind leading the blind. It's almost like they've all been bamboozled, bewitched. And in a sense, they have.
Just in our final question, some of the issues that we've seen paradoxically have come from police departments that have gone through reforms. That was apparently the case in Minneapolis. Apparently also in the case of Breonna Taylor. It was a terrible, obviously a terrible misapplication of it, but it apparently was due, according to the New York Times, to some change of tactics in terms of micro-targeting neighborhoods. So it can, no matter how much you reform, it can also go wrong.
Sure, and I don't think that's a reason to not reform. And one of the things that happened, if I give you kind of an example, the street team, they were talking about the director, Akilah Sherrills, who had been involved in negotiating a peace treaty between the Crips and Bloods in 1992. And he said the day after the treaty went into effect, someone was shot.
See, whenever I was up there with the Crips and the Bloods in Washington, D.C. and New York, my son and I went up there in 1989. They got on to us.
Same things applicable to the issue.
They got on to us. They was all over us. It just so happens I fled the city and got out of there before they could actually get a hold of us. But they had already pegged my son and I with the Apocalypse model in the back end of a red Dodge pick 'em up truck. I think it was a 87 model. 87 model. I had gotten enough money to purchase.
Frontlines Policing and the Police 2020, or rather Policing the Police 2020, airs